Good morning and or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on another session of We Connect Academy's Learning from Women Leaders Around the World series. My name is Carle, and today I'm very happy to introduce Ann Baret, who will be leading this session entitled Recruiting and Engaging Effectively with Ann Baret. Ann has spent over 20 years in the international corporate environment and also has experience in smaller enterprises. She's mainly responsible for HR, finance, and IT. In her time working for smaller enterprises, Ann discovered that her passion lies in the empowerment and personal development. She became a certified consciousness coach, a CCC, in 2014. Further accreditations have included performance consultant for talent and wealth dynamics, Neurozone coach, contribution compass coach, and a trained DiMartini method facilitator. With over 20 years of experience in the corporate world and her in-depth knowledge of human behavior and passion for excellence and transformation, Ann approaches coaching with a different perspective. She also works in executive coaching and development, supporting leaders to be effective in fast-changing environments and to realign their strategies. I'll let Ann introduce herself, but I'd like to remind all the attendees that you are muted, and if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat or Q&A boxes, and I'll read them out loud at the end of the webinar. Thank you, Ann, for being here with us today. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to share my passion. I'm always happy to engage and getting people to get the genius out of every single person that we meet and collectively creating incredible teams. So my background, it was in economics and finance, but I hated that environment. But it allowed me to be in organizations where in the 80s I started creating cross-functional teams before this term even existed. I was responsible for finance, but I felt that I could not deliver the appropriate information if I didn't understand and got the tendering department, the buying department, the actual sites engaged in the final delivery of the financial results. So I was creating cross-functional teams just to ensure that my work was done correctly, and also because I found it quite much easier to get the information from others so that my work was complete, but also the engagement was the favorite part of my work. So I was on the path of creating teams before I actually knew I was creating that. And through the years, I was very lucky to work in various industries, wholesale, retail, manufacturing, construction, engineering, and basically, for me, it doesn't matter what environment you're working in or what industry you're working in, the bases are always there. But before we start, I want to focus again why it is so important for us to look internally in organizations. So why, when all the focus is on external customers, where we don't have any problem spending any money. We do survey after survey, systems and processes put in place to just ensure that we get information from our external customer. And for me, understanding the external customer is the person that actually buys the product or service that you offer. But what if we spend all the money rather on the people inside the organization? So I call them the internal customers. So it's the employees, it's the different departments you're working in, it's the suppliers you're working in. So it's basically, for me, it's the whole ecosystem. So why are we just focusing on the person that's actually buying our product, as opposed to ensuring that what we deliver is right in the first place? And for that, it means that we need to, in my opinion, focus back on the internal side of the organization and spend some of that money that we spent on getting information and data on the external customer. Let's develop the intel inside the company. So I approach now companies to work to look at teams as customer success teams, or a great accounting team, or a great stakeholder engagement. So any interaction within a team or between teams, and everything I will be sharing will be applicable to that bigger ecosystem. So I really challenge you to look at things from the inside. So why is it important now more than ever to look what's happening on the inside? First of all, there is no playbook. For the first time in history, we're working in environments and organizations where there are 5 generations working together. There's no playbook. There's no written books on how do we actually deal with this. Each generation comes with its strengths and weaknesses. Much about millennials. We're hearing the negative side, but they bring an incredible dynamic to the organization that we really need to understand. The second one is that change is happening so fast that we need to create teams and environments to be agile and flexible. And I know we keep on hearing that, but how do we do that? We understand that it's important, and we've got to understand that human beings, in essence, in such a way that we resist change because there is no precedent, so therefore we don't know what's going to happen, and we'll do anything to not know the future. We need to have certainty as to what things are ahead of us. However, that's not possible anymore with the way things are changing. So we need to create a mindset of anticipating change and being okay with change. So it requires a totally different set of skills, totally separate set of EQ or social quotient, and we need new areas of expertise, not only on the social side, but we know that by 2030, 80% of the jobs that or the expertise and the skills we're gonna require in the futures don't exist now. So we're not with the fourth industrial revolution. We need to be able to have this culture of continuous learning, as the skills that we're gonna require in 5 years, 10 years down the line don't exist now. So in the past, we were just told what to do and apply our skills, and the skills were the same for the whole career. This is not applicable now. And that's why the word agility and flexibility is so popular, because we need to create those environments. Deloitte and Touche came up with a beautiful survey on the global human capital trend. And from the graph, you can see that traditional organizations were typically functional in silos. You had the support functions like accounts and marketing and logistics. And then you had this continuous battle between the support functions and the actual revenue generating organizations. But through technological change and through globalization and the global interactions in the whole ecosystem, we have to have an external focus through our whole ecosystem, and we need to be able to look at the same time within the organization and have a level of collaboration and agility. And they came up with a beautiful word, I thought, a symphonic network of teams operating model. I don't know if any of you are aware of the TEAL organization from Frederic Laloux. And basically it's understanding that enterprises don't exist for selling a product, but they add a value and they need to have a meaning and contribution to society as a whole for them to be able to be sustainable and profitable at the same time, although I suppose sustainability includes profitability. So the next trend is looking at what is coming up in the survey. So the SYMPHONIC C-suite is what's most important for the organization surveyed. So you can see there's 11,000 companies that were surveyed. And what do they mean by the symphonic C-suite? So if you think of an orchestra, you have the violins and you have the guitars, you have the flutes, you've got all the different instruments. So within the violins, they have to work as a team and being in tune with each other. But the other instruments have to do the same. So the music, the final product, is only as great as the harmony that is created between the different instruments. So although 85% of the organizations say it's very important or important, only 46% say they are very ready already. So going back to customer service, so we're spending a lot of money to getting satisfaction or understanding how we're going to create satisfaction with the external customers. When it comes to engagement or disengagement and the epidemic around it, and even at the C-suite, getting this collaborative co-opetition environment is still very much lacking. And that's where my passion comes in, because it's all easy to do. So I want to go a little bit more as to what the symphonic C-suite actually means. So we're talking about teams leading teams. So from the top onwards, it's not, so if we're looking at the C-suite, it's the harmony has to start on there. The commitment, the leading by example has to be unified and be one voice spoken. And that needs then to be cascaded down the organization. So they need to have cross-functional vision. They need to understand connectivity and lead by example and doing that. They need to understand and show how collaboration is done at C-suite level. And they need to be able to coordinate agile responses. So in moments of crisis, flexibility and agility are the things that are going to pull an organization through the crisis. And then co-opetition, which is now a new word, which is so important, is that within the teams, there needs to be this competitive combination of skills and strengths for the common good of the team, which ultimately leads to the common good of the organization and the impact in its environment. And through all of this, there's a continuous understanding of the power of each individual within the organization. So although we're looking continuously at teams, teams are made up by individuals, and we need to understand what the value system is and the strengths of those individuals and what is their meaningful contribution to organization, which is aligned to what they think is meaningful and what's most important to them. And we keep on ignoring this fact. So I'm very passionate in understanding that the basis and the core element for culture and teams is understanding values. Values determine the decision-making process. They determine on what the behavior. And I know we've got examples like Enron, where there is a set of value which is supposed to guide the organization on the way forward, which should be aligned to their vision, mission statement. But if you look at Enron, and they had their values set in marble in their offices, and their value statement included integrity, communication, respect, and excellence. Now, there's many examples of organization like this. KPMG at South African level, they've been involved with quite a few scandals, and all of their values were actually questioned. But if values are not the core, values determine the behavior of each individual that leads to the behavior of a team, which leads to the behavior of an organization. And if the behavior is not aligned to what the company wants to achieve, what's the point? And why having values if it's not something that you measure? And culture is just a way of looking at what the behavior looks like in an organization. And we need to be able to guide the employees according to that. So the inconsistency into what the leaders say or what they're not saying, in what they're doing and or not doing, and what they're rewarding and punishing, totally defines the culture and for me, ultimately, the engagement within an organization. So for me, going back to the core of values is critical in any team, and different team can have a different culture based on what it is that they need to achieve. An accounting culture will probably be very different to a sales culture, and that's fine as long as they're all aligned to the common goal of the organization. So to summarize, basically what I've said is, if you're climbing Kilimanjaro and you want to do it in 5 years down the line, that's your vision. And we need to have the steps in place, the strategic objectives, and then move away from the SMART goals that we've set out to do to WISE goals. WISE standing for wide spanning, inspirational, and sustainable enterprise development goals. So it's much more, it's ecosystem driven, and it looks at sustainability. And so if we're going to go to Kilimanjaro and we need certain things to be in place for us to be able to achieve that, we need to have quarterly targets, we need to have monthly targets, we need to have weekly feedbacks, individual feedbacks, we need team feedbacks on a much regular basis to ensure that we're on the right track because of the requirement to be agile and flexible. On the other side, you've got the cultural pillars. So you need the leadership, which is not functional driven, which is cross-functional. So it's a team of leaders, leaders of leaders, it's teams of teams. We need to have a clear understanding of the values that are going to drive the performance to get us to our vision. And we need to measure winning performance, which is again aligned to the values. So everything that you're going to do as a company, the central point continues to be the values. And the behaviors are the how you're going to get to that vision. And that creates engagement, and that gives you a start as to where to start employing employees, to employ the right people in the right places. So you can check what the engagement is and the culture of an organization by Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of Organization. Sorry, that is a misspell. So he's written this beautiful book, and basically he identified dysfunctional teams through 5 ways. The basis is absence of trust. And I know we keep on talking about it, but it's not actually implemented in organizations. So trust means to trust the employees that you employed and the team that is working for you and your core team members, that they will do the job that is required of them, that they have an understanding of what is required, and you trust them to do that in the time that is required, in the way that is anticipated. And for this, you're going to need to be able to have these critical conversations, those fierce conversations. And as human beings, we avoid conflict at all times, and that comes from being a child. Is when there's conflict, there's a fear of being rejected, and it's a question of survival. If there is conflict with a parent, we may not have a roof over our head, or we may not have food. So it's an ingrained habit that we have, and the way we brought up in an organization is, in the education system, is we're not enabled to have fierce discussions with authority, with parents, with leaders of organization, it's not really encouraged. But this is critical if you want to have an engaged team. Without the absence of trust and with fear of conflict, there's no ways you will have a team that is committed. So if you have a difficult decision to make as an organization, for example, laying off a quarter of your organization, keeping that away from the rest of the organization and avoiding conversations around that with the whole organizations, you're not going to get the rest of the organization committed to actually getting to the process of what is required. And if we think with AI and the automation of so many processes, changes will happen. We will have to be transparent as leaders and saying these skills will not be required in 3 years, 5 years. And we need to be able to upskill, cross-skill those employees going forward. And only then will you get the commitment of your teams. You will get accountability, which is the fourth symptom. And you are then able to look at results. But the basis is continuously trust. And that's the same as applicable to customers. It is the basis of any relationship, whether it's internal or external or within the ecosystem. So let's look a little bit more at team dynamics. Netflix has got two values. They have responsibility and they have freedom. And their whole organization is based on that. So those two words seem contradictory. Freedom on the one hand and responsibility on the other hand. How do they fit in? So when I work with organization, I realize that as companies grow, they are feeling that they're losing control and they employ more people. So what happens is they curtail freedom so that they're able to control the process. As they can't micromanage as they did in the beginning of a development of a team or organization, they curtail the employees' freedom continuously. But what happens with that is, so the purpose of the growth is to have a greater impact on the organization or on the community. But with growth, there's an increase in complexity. So with increased complexity, you need more systems and procedures. But what happens is that as you increase complexity, your percentage high-performing employees decrease because what made them good when you were growing your organization stifles them in the environment that you are creating right now. And in that process, you've got this chaos when the high performance employees disappear and your processes and your organization becomes more complex and you're creating chaos. So what you're doing then is you just create more and more processes and systems and procedures, and you keep on losing more high performing employees. So it's finding this right balance of retaining and increasing your percentage of high-performing employees faster than you can do with the business complexity. So therefore, you need to create an environment where they're allowed to be free while clearly understanding what their responsibilities are. So when I had a presentation 2 days ago and in a media environment, and they said, but how could you have freedom? You know, how could you have freedom in a live environment that is changing the whole time? And is it absolute? Does it mean that we can't have any rules and procedures in place? Absolutely not. It's the same as we're doing with teenagers. Do we give them the freedom to be able to express? Yes. Do we keep a certain safety and holding space for them to be able to express that freedom, but within the safety of a buffer? So as an organization, you need to have two types of rules, is the moral, ethical, and legal issues. And most often the organization don't focus on these rules. And then you need to have the rules to prevent irrecoverable disaster. And that's where responsibility comes in. So at the end of the day, as an organization, you still need to keep responsibility. And then you need to understand the difference between good and bad processes. For example, I know one organization where they allow credit cards. There's no limit to the credit cards issued to the relevant people. So in this case, it's sales personnel. So the company trusts the individual salespeople to be responsible enough and be able to motivate that whatever the expenses are is aligned to the purpose of the organization, and for them to achieve their goals as a necessary expense. There are other organizations where leave policies have been abandoned, where you're allowed to take vacation, but you are responsible to ensure that your organization and your team is able to function without you and has the tools and the skills to be able to carry on without your input. So you can see now that there's a link between freedom and responsibility. You cannot be free without having the responsibility. And we've got to look at individuals as being responsible, being human beings from start, and understanding that every single person in a team, in an organization, in whatever format it is, their greatest motivation is always contributing to success. Always. We get up in the morning for a purpose, and that purpose is to have a meaningful contribution. What we need to do as leaders is understanding that inner motivation, which is different for each person. So what is their greatest motivation? And often enough, it's not financial. They have a meaning and a purpose. And if we're employing people and we're employing individuals aligned to the meaningful contribution that an organization does, then it's a win-win both for the individual and for the organization. The other thing is we've got to keep on remembering is that teams and individuals thrive on challenge. Growth happens where there is equal challenge to support. That's where growth happens. If the challenge is too great, we fail. If we get support without challenge, we get complacent. So it's always finding that right challenge and trusting that the individuals that you're working with are able to rise to that challenge and support them in that process. So going back to the slide I had before, is having a focus on the overall vision, is that every single employee, for them to be engaged, needs to understand the business through and through. And it needs to be done on continuous communication, not on an annual conference or quarterly conference. If we're going to look at measurements and behavior to achieve our vision or monthly targets, we need to have continuous feedback as to how we're going to get there, so that we can adjust the plans going forward to make sure that we get to it. And by seeing that it's each individual's responsibility and freedom to get us to that vision, then we get a diversity of ideas and questions that we've never had before, because we've never asked it, we've never listened. We may have asked, but we may not have listened. The purpose of going to work is not to earn money. The purpose of going to work is to have a meaningful contribution, and we want to learn. We're not going there to spend our time 8 hours or whatever hours. If we believe that, we've got the wrong people on board, and we're the wrong leaders. I worked recently, or I'm still working with that organization, where they have to lay off 20 people in the next 10 months because they're transitioning from offering one service to another service that they believe is more profitable and sustainable, but they need those people in the process to achieve that product. So in our conversations with the C-suite, they said, we cannot share this information. This is confidential information. How stupid do we think our employees are when we believe that they're going to fall for that? They're in the process and supporting the organization to transition from one state to the other. They're the crucial component in making that change happen, but we rather not give them the information. So how engaged do you think this team will be, and how effective will this team be? Netflix got an awesome feedback system for their teams. They've got the start, stop, continue feedback system where they encourage or they measure each employee on the feedback given. So start doing more of this behavior, stop doing this, and we want to see more of this behavior. So we're not waiting for the annual review. We're at 360 based on things that happened 9 months ago, which may only be recollected in not in full detail. And we need to be able to create environments where strong opinions are cultivated, where we can argue and it's not taken personally. So being able to have these opinions and see the bigger picture and hearing what the others are saying, and even if we don't agree at the end, commit as a whole to the decision being made in that team, and not go out of that team and telling the rest of the team, yeah, this is decision, but we don't agree to that. So the other thing is that we have to do is build the company now that you want to be in 5 years down the line, or wherever your vision takes you. We've got to keep on focusing on the future. And you can't expect that the people that got you here today will be the people that will take you going forward or will lead you to where you want to be in 5 years down the line. And that's what millennials get. That's why millennials only stay 18 months to 3 years in an organization, because they understand the value that they contribute to a team. They understand the meaningful contribution that they do. And once that is completed, they understand that the current environment is not the right place. They need to be able in another environment and make that same or greater contribution. So the skills and the talent that you have currently are not going to be what you need in the future. So we cannot look at engagement the way we've done in the past. We need to be able to see these are the high potential employees that we're going to need in 2 years, 3 years down the line. These employees have fulfilled their value and are actually going to stifle the way forward. So how can we cross-skill them or allow them to be free to move on? We're responsible adults. They are responsible adults. We don't have to treat our employees as teenagers. They are fully grown adults, and they should get the respect that they deserve. And that's why it's important to have the right person in every single position. And you need to be able, with skills being more and more difficult to get, there's going to be a greater and greater cost to acquisition of great skills. Is you need to be that great company that is going to attract people in the competition for skills, but also you need to be the great company to be from, so that when your employees leave you because they fulfill their mission, is they can still share with their environment how great the company is that they worked for. So talent density and creating appealing challenges and understanding internal motivation is really critical to get the highest engagement from employees. So to summarize a bit of what I've said is, as you grow, you need to minimize the rules, as difficult as it is, because you need to understand that high-performing people will be limited if chaos is restricted. Changes happen within chaos. and this needs to be allowed with a certain safety net. Mature organization focus continuously on efficiency and effectiveness, and we need to look at flexibility and agility in organization, and that's only going to be done through people. So when you look at a whole ecosystem and you look from an individual point of view to a teams, we have to look at the whole ecosystem. We have to look at what we believe we can do, what we actually can do, what the existing environment is, and how do we excel performance. So we have to look at ability and talent. We have to look at environment, performance, and behavior at individual level and at team level. So I call this the iScan environment. And this is, so it's looking whatever we did with the external customer is bringing it internally and understanding what the human behavior and the drivers are of our employees. And we need to have diversity. It is incredibly important. So when I talk about diversity, I mean race, I mean gender, I mean age, I mean of different natural energies, such as having people that can accelerate and ignite change. We need to have people that nurture and inspire and kindles the growth in others, which is very different to the sustaining energy, where those people look at nourishing other people's ideas. So you have the people with big vision, and then you get the people that actually implement those visions. And then obviously we need people that look at the systems and processes and refine them through analysis, and we keep on perfecting. So if you look at life cycles of organizations, you'll see that you start off with an activating energy, which is where the idea or the project or the product is created. Once that idea is seen, we need to employ the right people to actually make that idea happen. Then we need to have the right people on board to ensure that it's delivered in the correct way. And then we need people that look at the products and the systems and processes and say, is this efficient? How can we improve it? And there you complete the life cycle. So it's the same life cycle in teams. When you are forming a team, it's the same life cycles in nature. You start off with spring, where everything is new. You get the summer energy, where everything is warm and fuzzy and everybody looks after everybody. Then you get the harvest, the sustaining energy, where it's about harvesting what you have actually sowed in spring. And then the winter is about looking at everything, looking at the soil, making everything ready for the next spring. So as individuals, we have these cycles. As team, we have these cycles. As departments, we have these cycles. And as organizations, we have these cycles. So when you look at it, not to have a balance of all these different energies and people will lead, and from people point of view, I specifically want to stress the racial and the gender diversity. We cannot optimize teams. So the other important thing from a cross-functional point of view is, if you look at from a vertical point of view, these are the functional silos that we've been trained for so many decades to work in. And then from a horizontal point of view, you get the different levels of management. They're beautiful examples of team organizations that are highly functional when we create teams not made within the function or within the level of organization, but cross-functional, cross-level, and allowing them the freedom and responsibility to act in the best interest of the community that they are serving. So their internal customer, external customer. In Holland, a company called Buurwacht has beautifully demonstrated. It's an organization looking after the elderly within the community, and they've totally created different setup of teams. So instead of making it at per level and per function, so all the same kind of nursing staff that provide same service in a group, they created cross-functional, different types of nursing and services required for specific areas that they are responsible. So each team is responsible for a block of buildings or parts of a town or a part of a town, and they as a team identify what the needs are of their community. They then decide how many nurses and what type of nursing is and what types of service are required. They set the budget based on that community because they understand the community the best. So my invitation is to in whatever organization you're working with, whether it's yours or within your team, is to start off with having a clear vision and purpose. So understanding your why. I'm sure all of you know about SYMPHONIC. So really understanding what is your meaningful contribution to the organization, or what is the organization contributing to the community. Understanding your values and rolling them out through the organization, and really measure the behavior that you are looking for on a continuous basis. And then ensuring that you've got an organizational design aligned to your strategy. So creating those cross-functional, cross-level teams that will give you the greatest opportunity to be able to get to your why. And then obviously it is a continuously reviewing of the talent that you have, of getting the right people in place, and continuously measuring performance at short term, medium, and looking at different, so making sure that performance is measured on what is really important. So not, for example, retention of employees, because maybe that's not a great performance indicator for your industry, as you are moving into a new area where actually you need to start looking at new skills and identify your high potential employees rather than keeping the high performance individuals that you currently have. So to finish off, I'd like to share this quote with Antoine. So if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the people to gather wood, divide the work and give orders. That's what we've done in the past. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea, because that's what we made to come on this earth for. That's our purpose for every single one of us. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Anne, for this insightful presentation. Yeah, this was excellent. We did have a couple of questions. I think you might have mentioned something about technology a little bit earlier on in the presentation. We do have a question. How does technology change the way people engage and how you can lead them?
And how? Sorry, I didn't catch the last part of the question.
How you can lead them.
Okay, so technology can support organizations and feedback mechanism and connection. But it's only, we need to remember that we keep on looking at behavior. So any technology that is used in employee engagement is only going to be as successful as the engagement with that technology. So how do we lead them? We lead them by ensuring that our performance, what we rewarding, is the behavior that we are looking for. So if we're wanting engagement with technology, then we need to reward that engagement. So I don't know, like here you've got in the health environment, there's a health insurance company called Discovery. So how they engage with their internal and external customers is, for every time that you go to gym, you get 300 points. And if you go 3 times to gym and you earn 900 points, then you get a free smoothie. If you do this consistently, you moved up and you get discounts on, for example, airfare. So they're providing rewards in many different ways so that a variety of people can feel rewarded. Because not everybody, I'm not going to feel rewarded if they offer me a smoothie, but if they offer me discounts on air flights, that motivates me. So the engagement happens when the inner motivation of the employee is there to engage with technology.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Another question that came in is, what are the steps to realize the balance of challenge?
The balance of challenge between and the balance with support, you'll feel that if the challenge is too great, words such as stuck or overwhelm or so it's words that are going to be used that shows that they're not in control of the process and that it's just too much. That is when challenge is too much. When there is no challenge, there won't be any engagement. They just cruise along, and they'll be less and less engaged because there's no purpose for them to engage. So there will be less contribution because it's just too easy. So in organization, I don't think we often get to that comfort level where things are just easy and continuously routinely just carry on. I think we deal more with challenge in our organizations and at personal level, and we need to listen to the words employees use. I'm stuck, I'm overwhelmed, this is too much. So when we're starting to use obsoletes like never or always, there are always indications that things may be a little bit too much. And again, it's identifying and really understanding the individual. So and one person may be more resilient to challenges than another person. And I suppose that's where EQ is so important, and raising resilience within organization is a critical part of increasing performance. And the way we can increase resilience is by creating these opportunities where employees are allowed to come up with new systems and processes or ideas and products. And if they fail, being able to allow them to bounce back and learning how do we bounce back from failure. Because we are so focused on success the whole time, but we're not learning how to fail and being able to bounce back easily. I hope that answers the question.
Sure, definitely. I'm at least from my perspective, yeah, it's a complete answer. And actually, the follow-up question is maybe related. The question is, how often is feedback necessary? And you just mentioned people using certain words, which maybe is where they get, maybe those words are collected from the feedback. But the follow-up is asking if there's an amount or how often feedback would be necessary.
Ideally, feedback should always be spontaneous and as and when it arises, because the best way to change behavior is to be notified whether that behavior is the right behavior or what they're doing is the right thing. So continuous feedback in one form or another is the best. So how do we do it practically? Each organization does it differently. Some organizations have got a board on a weekly basis where feedback is encouraged to peers, or to or come up with a new idea boards, or each organization, each team needs to identify what is the right way to implement feedback. Each team and so it depends on the life cycle of the team and the organization. So you cannot put a standard format of what is right we know that continuous feedback is right. So the team and the individuals within the team need to understand what is the feedback that is required from within the team and from their internal customers, whether it's other departments or other teams. And so that conversation needs to happen as to what is the right thing for that team and that environment at that moment. And that changes the whole time. So it's continuously driving and not supposing that once you've implemented, you can just carry with that for the next 2 years. What works now may not work in 3 months or 6 months. And that is where the responsibility and accountability at individual level and within a team environment is important. They need to take accountability to share what information, what feedback they require.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that has come in is if you see changes that need to be made in a small organization where interaction with leadership is frequent, how do you express those opinions? Is it best to be candid?
I believe that the only way to communicate, or if changes are required in a small organization or big organization, is just being transparent and candid and open. That's the basis. If you don't have trust, whether it's a small team, a big team, a small organization, or a big organization, you cannot move forward with any changes. And the changes that are required today may not be the changes that are required in 6 months. And that's why I stress so much is being able to have the skills to have these powerful conversations that allow the different teams, the different individuals at the different levels to contribute. And ensuring that whatever decisions are made going forward on change has been looked from a diversity point of view. So again, race, gender, skills, talent, functions, levels. That is the only way for me that you're going to get full engagement for changes going forward is full transparency and candid conversation or fierce conversations.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering all the questions that have come in, and thank you to those that are listening. Ann has put up the slide with contact information and her LinkedIn, where you can find out a little bit more about her and her coaching. If you have any additional questions, now would be the time. If not, I'll go ahead and wrap this up, and just know that this session will be on the WeConnect Academy YouTube channel, and therefore you can go back onto the channel and reference anything if need be. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this session up. Thank you, Ann, very much for your presentation and for sharing your insight with our networks. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and providing this information.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and thank you again for sharing your passion.
Thank you.
All right, everyone have a good day.